Welcome to Shaped by Faith with your host, Theresa Rowe. To find out more about Shaped by Faith and Theresa Rowe, please visit shapedbyfaith.com or visit the YouTube channel, Facebook, or Instagram. And now, here is Theresa Rowe.
Welcome to Shaped by Faith, where we shape our bodies and hearts for God's purposes. I have another amazing, inspirational guest today with me. Her name is Ruth Munday, and she's an author. But she's so much more than that. So I'm going to read your bio, Ruth, so I don't get anything wrong, okay? Poetry and writing have been means by which Ruth has enjoyed conveying her thoughts since childhood. After a fulfilling vocation as a registered nurse, that is so awesome, Ruth felt the Lord calling her in a new direction. As only life he can, the Lord blended her many life experiences as a nurse to prepare her for continued ministry in the community. With a special place in her heart for those struggling with grief, Ruth offers support and unique ideas for helping bereaved families, members find positive ways to cope. Ever the aspiring author, Ruth has written and self-published 3 books on topics she believes God has inspired her. And yes, he has. And they are so good, Ruth. So welcome to Shaped by Faith.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. What your books are lovely. And I'm so glad that a fellow mutual author friend connected us together. That was God's divine connection. I love how he does that.
Yes.
But I would love for you to give us a glimpse into your background, like before your nursing and writing career took off.
Sure, I'll be glad to. As I was reflecting back on this, I thought, I can't remember a time in my life when I didn't know of the Lord. I was very blessed to grow up in a strong Christian family. My parents, grandparents, everybody always instilled in me that God is love and that he has a plan and a purpose for your life. And so I feel like that firm foundation gave me faith, maybe kind of looking at my parents' and grandparents' faith to start with, but then developing my own as I've grown throughout my life. And so as a child, I was encouraged to explore different hobbies and activities. And as I shared, I love to write. I can remember writing poetry as young as maybe 8. I would get on this old electric typewriter and just peck away my little poems. And I kept some funny little journals. And I also had a love of baking. And so I would enjoy spending time in the kitchen with my mom and grandmother. And I feel like all of my hobbies and interests have come to fruition throughout my life, as far as being able to use baking as part of a ministry too, which I'll get into. And then also I've enjoyed music, and I've kind of dabbled around in some songwriting, which as an 8 to 10-year-old, I thought, oh, this is fun. And then now I've just had some recent opportunities where that has come back into play too. So I'm excited. It's just, you don't know the little dreams that are planted in your heart as a child that come to fruition later in life when you have long put those aside and the Lord brings them back. And he's like, you remember this? And I'll be like, oh yeah.
He's an amazing father, isn't he? He does
He
that.
is indeed.
And you know, the desires that you have inside of you, he fulfills those as you keep your eyes focused on him. And how amazing that God does that for us. He loves us so much. So everyone has different gifts and talents, you know,
Yes.
but to use them for his glory is an amazing thing to do. And you don't have to use it as an occupation, just to use what God has given you to bring
Right.
glory and honor to him. So, okay, you became a nurse. What led you into that profession?
Well, as a child, as I said, I love to bake, and part of that baking was getting out in the yard and making some mud pies and playing with turtles. And on one of those, mud pie sessions, I got sick with salmonella and was in the hospital for a while as a child, and which led to some other complications. And so I spent a fair amount of time in the hospital, and I guess that is where my interest in the medical field started. And I had one special nurse, Susan, I don't remember her last name, but she stood out in my mind as providing just such comfort when she entered the room. And I guess that stuck with me, and a desire to help others begin to bloom out of that experience. And my grandmother and my mother were teachers. And I think the expectation of the first grandchild and oldest daughter was to be a teacher. And when I broke the mold and told my mom I wanted to be a nurse, she was like, Ruth, are you sure? And I was like, yes, Mom, I'm sure. She said, you don't want to be a teacher. And I was like, no, I really feel a call to the medical community. And she said, okay. And then from then she became my biggest supporter, but she was going to make sure I'd heard the right call.
Oh, that's really neat. And to have you in the hospital at the time, I mean, that was God's divine encounter, especially with the nurse that took such good
Right.
care of you. I mean, how
Yes.
amazing is that? Okay, so let's
Yeah.
talk about your book, Rainbow of Comfort. So, how did God inspire you to write it?
So, Rainbow of Comfort is about the experience my family and I went through when my mother was diagnosed with cancer that later progressed into a hospice setting. And this is the photo of the childhood home where she
Beautiful.
actually grew up. And when we were trying to decide whether to go home with hospice or go to a facility, I can get more into that in a little bit. We went home to the house where she grew up at. This is my grandparents' house. And so she was actually in the house on this day. We were looking out the window and it was raining. And then all of a sudden, a beautiful double rainbow started shining, and she could see it, and I could too. And my family's all gathering at the window. And I went running out the steps with my cell phone in my hand just to try to capture it. Because when you go through experiences like this, they're difficult, but God is still there, and He's still providing comfort in various ways. And sometimes it can come through nature. And so we felt like this beautiful double rainbow was just a hug from above. So I went out, took the photo, and later on, after she had passed away, we felt inspired to share our experiences and our various forms of comfort that we had received through a devotional book. And so that's what Rainbow of Comfort is, God's love over you during difficult times. And so the book is starts with a poem and a dedication to my mother that I wrote. And then also, so there's the poem there.
Okay.
And then all of the photos in the book were from my mother's collection. She loved flowers, and she was really just love itself in action. And so this is a kind of a tribute and a way that we chose to process our grief in a positive manner, and also with the desire to give back to others that are going through a hard time. The book is not just about grieving, but it's also about other difficulties, because you can have loss in other life, loss of a job, loss of a dream, loss of whatever it is. This book is kind of here to address that, and that God is still with you, still providing comfort. And, that we're hoping that it can be used to help others.
Oh, it definitely is and will. And that's a beautiful book, beautiful cover. As you were explaining how you saw the double rainbow and you ran out with your cell phone,
Yeah.
not the exact same thing happened, but that happened to me years and years ago when I was praying about something in particular. And
Okay.
I saw it, and it was still raining, and I ran out and I took it, and it was right over our home. And I'm like, it was
Yeah.
just a God wink, like, thank you,
It
Lord. And
really is.
I
Yeah.
mean, He does speak to us through nature. He does. If we're paying attention, it's His
That's right.
creation. The purpose behind your book, I know it's to help people with grieving and loss and things like that.
Right.
Would you like to, and I know I didn't ask you this before, but would you like to share your poem with us when we're ending this first segment? I would love for you
Oh,
to read it.
sure, I will. And
Okay.
I can tell you a little bit more about the purpose of the book also.
Okay. We've got about
Um,
1 minute for this segment.
Okay. Anne's heart. Anne's heart is a glowing rainbow shining with a zeal for life, enfolding loving love all around her, lighting darkness, not despair. Anne's heart encircles loved ones, family, friends, community, a selfless circle, always seeking to serve others with no bounds. Anne's heart holds a rainbow of music bursting forth in sounds of joy, hymns of God, songs of kindness, colorful notes of peace and love. Anne's heart is a prison of wonder, reflecting joy in simple things: violets, zinnias, buttercups, mountains, rivers, birds, and snow. Anne's heart is a loving prism, spreading light through the world she loves, inspiring courage in an arc of faith and hope of eternal peace.
That is so
And so,
beautiful. It
thank you.
is. Let's get into that more when
Yeah,
we come back. Okay, so let's take
sure.
a quick break and we'll be right back with more Shaped by Faith. Everyone, stay tuned. Welcome back to Shaped by Faith, where we shape our bodies and hearts for God's purposes. I have an amazing guest, as always, on Shaped by Faith. She is an author and she has self-published 3 books. So, Ruth, thank you so much for sharing your heart and the poem that you just read about your mother. Absolutely beautiful. Now, I know that the proceeds from your book, you always give the proceeds away. So for this book, it's going to the hospice ministry. So can you explain
Yeah,
that?
I sure can. We started after my mother passed away. In the coming year, we wanted to have something to focus on for her birthday and also to find a way to give back to our community and find a positive way to express our grief. So we chose the book route. And then also, we toured around during the time when we were choosing whether to go home hospice or facility hospice. And I saw very sad circumstances of people just alone in their rooms
Mm.
by themselves, no family. And so that made an imprint on my heart, which the Lord then inspired us to start what we call the Psalm 121 ministry. Psalm 121 was my mother's favorite psalm. And the first 2 verses are such powerful verses for anybody going through a difficult time. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes
Mm.
from the Lord, the maker of
Yeah.
heaven and earth. And so our hospice ministry is called Psalm 121. And on admission into a hospice facility or home hospice, a patient and or their family members would get a bag from us that has a letter saying you're not alone, has some toiletry items, a Bible, a blanket, and so the Rainbow of Comfort book sales go to support that ministry and buy the items needed for the bags.
That is wonderful. You know, you've turned your grief into a blessing. You know, you really have. You were proactive and you decided not to sit down. And I mean, there is a time for grieving, and everyone
Oh,
grieves so
sure.
differently, but you poured your heart and soul into this by writing the book and by helping others. And that's what we're called to do. We really are, to
Yeah.
get up and help other people. Okay, so let's talk about your next book, Molly's
Yes.
Joy. Yes. And it
So,
was also written
mhm.
for what, a fundraiser for Molly?
Yes. So Molly is a dear little girl from our local area.
Okay.
And I first knew her at a children's hospital where I worked, and she was my little patient. So I have
Oh,
known her since day one.
okay. Show your book. Why don't you were about to do that? Show your
Sure.
book.
Yes. So this is her. This is the book is called Molly's Joy because she is so inspiring and she just radiates joy in all that she does. And all of the pictures are painted in watercolor based off real life photos of Molly and her family. And so I'm certainly blessed to continue to keep in touch with them. Molly's family and my family sort of knew each other distantly. And then
Mhm.
after Molly was born, we got reconnected in the hospital. And so that's kind of how we grew, and I've been blessed to stay a part of their lives ever since.
Oh,
And
she's a beautiful young lady. You sent me
she is,
pictures
yes,
of her, and you can show those.
this is her
Oh,
now, and her little sister Jill. And Jill just
oh.
turned 7 yesterday, and so we celebrated her 7th birthday. And so I'm still very much part of their lives, and she continues to inspire me. Uh, would you like me to go into more detail, or
Well,
you have?
I was going to ask you, okay, let's
Yeah.
talk about her health issues. Like, so how did Molly's parents first discover there was something wrong with her? And maybe you can explain that.
Yes. So on their anatomy scan around the 20-week mark on a prenatal ultrasound, they determined that Molly did have a defect in her intestines. And when she was born, her intestines were born outside of her body. And so a lot of them had gotten damaged and diseased just from being outside. And so
Mm.
she had to have surgery right away. And they were able to go in and save a small part of her bowel, but not very much. And so she has what they call short bowel syndrome. meaning anything that she eats would just pass right through. And so she can't get nutrition, all that she needs through her intestines. She had to have a line surgically placed in her chest, and she gets a special form of IV fluids called total parenteral nutrition and lipids, and those help her grow. And when she was little, I mean, her parents didn't want to let this slow her down. She wears her IV pumps in a backpack, and
Oh,
she just lives life to the fullest. She has a gastric tube, feeding tube, and she has an ostomy bag, but you would never know it. She just is amazing and has the best attitude. So,
so she truly is a joy. The Lord is your strength. I mean, she
yes,
could be on the poster for that.
yeah.
So evidently she's handled all of these medical challenges like a champ, right?
She has. And I will say her mother, when she found out on the ultrasound the results, she was given some special verses in her quiet time for the Lord. And it was
Hmm.
from First Thessalonians, rejoice always. She said, I didn't know what to do when I got the diagnosis, but I did know that, we're still supposed to find our joy in the Lord and that He will give us our strength. And so I do believe that Molly has gotten strength from her family, her parents, her own joy in the Lord. Molly goes to church. She loves to sing. She dances. She plays gymnastics. She
Oh,
does
wow.
sports. So she doesn't let anything slow her down. And as a nurse, I've seen children with her condition, and they do not thrive like she does. They
Hmm.
might be slowed down by different things, and she is just radiating. And she loves to help others. She loves to go with me on some of my visiting rounds for grief ministry. She's out there loving on people. And
Oh,
so it is
wow.
just amazing to me how the Lord brings this full circle. But this book was written for her as a fundraiser because she does have ongoing medical bills. She may have future needs. And so she has certainly a testimony. And I just wanted to
Hmm.
hear her story.
Oh, that's beautiful. And isn't
Mhm.
it amazing what they can do in the medical profession now and see into the womb and
Yes.
and know in advance the challenges and be prepared for it. That's got to be God's intervention
Oh,
as
for sure,
well.
for sure.
Yes.
Mhm.
So I know Molly's impacted you. I
Yeah.
know she's inspired you, but can you think of anything in particular, or do you have an inspirational story about her that you want to share?
Well, she would, when I would go and visit her in the hospital, uh, when she would be in for various and sundry surgeries or whatever, she just doesn't let it slow her down. I mean, it might be a holiday, it might be whatever it is, she's going to make the best of it. She is going to have her toys and her games and be engaging. I mean, you would hardly know with this child that anything was going on. She might, she just engages with everyone and wants, to just have fun. And I think that her strong spirit, she is so resilient.
Mm,
That inspires me in my own life. If we're going through a difficult time, if this little girl can do it, so can you. And
yes.
so she's very, very inspiring.
So what do you want your readers to take away from your book?
From Molly's Joy, I want
Mhm,
people to realize no matter what your limitations are, you can still enjoy the life that you've been given. And for
mhm.
children that have difficulties like Molly does, I hope that this will inspire them as well and their families to see that you can get out and you can enjoy life and you can do things, and not have to just stay at home and be tied down. That there is a way to get out and enjoy the life that you've been given.
And we should all be inspired by her because,
Yes.
wow. As far as her medical diagnosis, um,
Mhm.
what is it moving forward? Will she be able to live a long, healthy life?
So moving forward, she every day she gets her special IV fluids through her central line,
Mhm.
and she gets some shots that help her every day. She gets various and sundry things. So they have taught her to be independent. She takes good care of herself, so she goes to school. And moving forward, it just kind of depends on how things go. There is the possibility of a transplant in the future. They do bowel transplants and things. But right now, she's kind of stable where she is, and we're hoping that that continues and that she can continue to just enjoy doing all the fun things that little girls like to do, and not having to, worry too much about impending medical crisis.
Absolutely. Well, let's take a real quick break. We'll be back with more Shape by Faith, so everyone stay tuned. Welcome back to Shape by Faith, and Ruth Munday is my guest today, and she has talked about 2 of her books, and now we're in her 3rd book, and they are also inspiring. So, Ruth, what inspired you to write your next book, Button of Bravery? And I love the title.
Yeah. Yes, Button of Bravery. It's written for Healing Hearts Child Advocacy Center, which is a center we have here in our local area that supports children of abuse or neglect. It allows them to come in one time and through a forensic interview, be able to share their story with a specially trained interviewer. And they are videoed with the goal of having it just one time only. And that way they don't have to repeat it over and over again. And so when they come to the facility, they are welcomed, and it's very child friendly, and they share their story. And then after the story is shared, they're taken to this room called the button room, and they are allowed to select a button out of a tray. This is an illustration from my book that you can see. And they pick a button that would represent themselves, and then they put it into what we call the button machine. And they're told that it's the button of bravery, and that children besides themselves have been in there before. And they place their button in the machine, and it goes down. And then once many buttons have been collected, they're placed in heart-shaped collages on the wall. So when you walk in the room, you're impacted by all the children that have been through the facility from all the buttons on the wall.
That's so creative, isn't
yes.
it?
So when I took a tour of that, as my background as a nurse, I took care of children that had been victims of abuse or neglect. And those children, the stories stay with you. And so when I took a tour of the facility, I was really impacted by the button room, and the thoughts of those children wouldn't go away. And so I came home, and I've always, as I said, conveyed my thoughts through poetry. And so I came home, wrote a poem. And then one of the volunteers for Healing Hearts Child Advocacy Center said, you should really turn that poem into a book. And so we just chose to illustrate the lines of the poem. And one of my friends watercolored it for me. Okay. And it turned into an amazing book launch where we had a tour of the facility, and all the artwork is hung in the facility now. And it's been a really neat fundraiser, and something that I never dreamed would happen, but the Lord put it on my heart, and He saw it through.
That's also wonderful. I would love for you to read your poem. Do you mind doing
Sure.
that? Okay.
I do not mind.
Okay.
It's called Button of Bravery. It says, you wear buttons on your clothes. I hold one in my hand. I am told there have been others like me, right here where I stand. I squeeze it now for courage, stepping forward to drop it in the box. I watch it fall into its place, rolling, spinning, then it stops. For I have shared my story with those who fight to right the wrong. I have hope for healing, though the journey may be long. I see the hearts up on the wall, hearts of buttons from someone like me. I will be remembered when I go, my button of bravery.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yes.
Ruth,
and
what
if
are...
anybody,
go ahead. Well, I was going to ask you.
Yeah. If anybody has a situation where they are concerned, every state has a certain number you can call to report abuse or neglect suspicions. And it's all of our jobs to be watchers of the children under our care in our community. And if there is something going on, please do take the time to get that child to a safe place and to the right services that can help them.
Absolutely. Ruth, what are the ages of the children at the center?
Age 3 through 17. They start
wow.
at 3 because the child has to be able to talk, to be able to share. Mhm.
So, what do you want your readers to take away from your book, Buttons of Bravery?
I just want to create community awareness, nationwide awareness, really,
Hmm.
about that child abuse and neglect goes on in every community. It may not be, in your direct path, but it's happening. And so these children need our help. These centers need help with their funding. They're often short staffed and relying on grants, and they do such important work. And so I just want to highlight their efforts and also highlight these children because they are brave and
Hmm.
they deserve to have community support.
Now, where can we find your books, Ruth?
My books are all local right now. We can mail them out if you
Okay.
want to contact me or email me. My email address is booksforagoodcause@gmail.com.
Okay. So, what's next for you? Do you have another book in mind? Has God given you
I
something?
do have some more book. Yes, yes. I do have a book in mind for 2025. It's another nonprofit that one of my friends has started, and I want to highlight it. And just waiting to see what else is coming. I feel like my assignments come, so I'm waiting on the next assignment.
That's kind of exciting. Now, you had
Yeah.
mentioned in the first segments about cooking and baking.
Yes.
Yeah. So, tell us about that.
So I do love as a hobby to cook and bake,
Yeah.
and I found that that is a great way to share love with others, especially in grieving or hospice type settings.
Mm.
If you have a caregiving situation going on and you're a loved one or a friend looking on, and you're like, "What can I do to help?" Food always helps because if you are taking care of a loved one, you may not have time to cook, or you may not have time to grocery shop, and so looking for ways to help others going through a difficult time is something that everybody can do, and food is certainly a love language of many. And so, baking, for God's glory and to help others is a way that maybe somebody could help.
That is so good. Ruth, I want to thank you so much. You've been so enjoyable just to get to know and to listen to your story. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you for listening. I'm Theresa Rowe, and everyone have a blessed day. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Shaped by Faith with Theresa Rowe. Remember to visit shapebyfaith.com to find out more about workouts, the TV show, podcasts, blogs, Shaped by Faith products, and much more.